What is hermeneutics? This video will give you new clarity on how people, including you and I, interpret Scripture. Even if you are aware of this content, you will see how it ties well to Christian unity. Before we start, we will briefly touch on two terms, exegesis and hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is defined as the principles that people use to understand what something means. Exegesis refers to the actual interpretation of a specific biblical text. So, when we apply the principles of interpretation, this is hermeneutics. When we begin to explain a biblical text, we are doing exegesis. Okay, here we go. In this video, I would like to give an overview of three things. 1. What is hermeneutics? 2. Why do we need hermeneutics? 3. Where does hermeneutics fit in the grand scheme of things? What is hermeneutics? If we look at hermeneutics as the science and art of biblical interpretation, this will beg the question of what are we interpreting? The Bible. And whatever sect, denomination, or viewpoint people belong to that claim to be Christ followers, they all have some system of interpreting the Bible. Many just don't know what system is, or else they don't realize a particular hermeneutic has been taught to them. In fact, every time you and I talk with someone, watch TV, or read something, we are using intuitive principles to understand what is being said. Those principles are, by definition, hermeneutics. There are 5 components of all communication, whether the content is written, verbal, or visual. 5 parts. So the 5 parts are the sender or author, the encoding, the message, the decoding, and the receiver. In the case of the Bible, the sender is the author of the book of the Bible. The message is the written text, the receiver is first the intended audience, and second to you and I. So, whether I am talking to my wife or a friend, or reading the Bible, these 5 steps of communication are always happening. You have the person delivering the message, you have language and culture to encode and deliver that message, you have the message itself, and finally, you have the receiver who uses the same language and culture to decode the message. Why we need hermeneutics now, in most cases, interpretation is intuitive and spontaneous to us. We don't need to learn additional principles to read the news online or chat with a friend. This is because of at least 3 things. We 1. Speak the same language, 2. Live in the same culture, and 3. Live at the same time. So, why do we need hermeneutics? Well, just remove just one of these 3 components, and you will need to utilize a different set of principles to interpret, right? Try reading something in English that is even a century or 2 old, and you will find yourself having a hard time understanding what is being said. The same goes for trying to understand someone from a different part of our country, or even a different country. They will have a different culture, customs, idiomatic expressions, etc. I remember when our kids were small, we lived in Maine for about 9 months. There were times when I literally could not understand some of the old-timey lobstermen, and finally we are completely lost if the speaker doesn't speak our language. These things are what scholars call noise. And noise is anything that interrupts the flow of communication between the sender and receiver. Now, in the case of the Bible, the writers and the receivers normally didn't have these forms of noise, and so the intended audience could mostly understand what the biblical authors were saying. This means that they could understand what was being said automatically and unconsciously. However, for us as secondary receivers trying to interpret the Bible, we don't have that same luxury as the intended audience receivers. When the Bible was written, the time, language, and culture was vastly different than ours. And so we will need a different set of rules to properly understand this ancient book. For now, we will just focus on this thought. Hermeneutics is defined as the principles people use to understand communication. Although this is normally automatic for us, if you introduce any form of noise between the sender or author and the receiver, you will need additional principles to properly understand what is being communicated. In an upcoming video, we will see that there are actually 8 forms of noise, sometimes called gaps or distance, that exist between us and the proper understanding of the Bible. Where does hermeneutics fit in? There are some major interrelated topics to cover in order to be able to achieve more unity in the church. A useful system for understanding the Bible is certainly at the heart of it, and that is why I started with hermeneutics. The 2 following points will help us see where we are going in the following videos, and where hermeneutics fits in this picture. The first point is that hermeneutics isn't an end-all, but simply an important component for our overall understanding of the Bible. Dr. Abner Cho would chart hermeneutics something like this. Hermeneutics informs our exegesis, which informs our biblical theology, which informs our systematic theology. If you recall, We said that hermeneutics are the principles and methods used to interpret Scripture, and exegesis is the actual interpretation of a specific text. To understand how exegesis informs our biblical theology and how biblical theology informs our systematic theology, we will cheat a little by discussing two principles that we utilize to help guide us in understanding the Bible. There are 7 total, and we will discuss these in a future video. For now, let's peek at the 2 that will help in our current conversation. They are: 1. The harmony principle. Any given portion of the Bible can have only that meaning which harmonizes with the doctrine of the Bible as a whole. There will be continuity between books of the Bible. 2. The progressive principle. Later revelation may clarify, complete, or supersede earlier revelation. Biblical theology. Wayne Grudem says that biblical theology gives special attention to the teachings of individual authors and sections of Scripture, and to the place of each teaching in the historical development of Scripture. Biblical theology focuses on the understanding of each doctrine that the biblical authors and the original hearers or readers possessed. Systematic theology. Wayne Grudem says this of systematic theology. Systematic theology, on the other hand, makes use of the material of biblical theology and often builds on the results of biblical theology. Furthermore, systematic theology focuses on summarizing each doctrine as it should be understood by present-day Christians. Summary. This was just an overview, and in the next few videos, we will dive deeper into the 8 challenges to understanding the Bible and the 7 principles of hermeneutics. Then we will look at the inductive Bible study method with its 3 components: observation, interpretation, and application. This will help us to correctly understand the message of the Bible.